Yeah, and so another big point in this book that I do want to get to too is that a lot of people, and actually Lindsay had said this on our last podcast a little bit, is when you're marketing a product, the best way to market a product is to bake the marketing into the product itself.
And just like feeling good, like having like a little bit of excitement, like you're trying new things are happening in new environment. But yeah, change is coming, and change is a good thing.
All right, welcome everybody to the Infinite Creative Podcast. My name is Sean, and in person we have
Fitzy.
Woo!
Well, on this note, I'm also like Fitz or Michael Christopher Fitzgerald. Just call me Fitz. It makes it easier.
Yeah, call him Fitz. I call him Fitz. But yeah. Welcome, everybody. Today we are here in person, and we're going to talk about some interesting stuff. I guess, first of all, I wanted to talk about just speaking up and kind of the importance of speaking up in situations. Our first podcast ever was kind of talking about how Donald Trump, made an airplane, and the design team never spoke up, right? So he made all these dumb decisions, and then it cost a lot of money because nobody wanted to speak up.
I think that is a valuable lesson that we all have to learn in life, because I had that on another podcast where I'm basically like, I should have speaked up and be like, hey guys, get closer to the mic, and I have not done that, and that led to so much more like work, because afterwards I had to fix it, and sometimes like a quick and easy, hey, fix this.
Yeah. I mean, so with clients, it's hard to speak up sometimes because you want people to be happy with you, right? You don't want to like stop the flow. And that's something else I kind of want to talk about later in this episode too, is flow state. I think I brought it up before on the podcast, but I really want to dive into it a little bit. But anyway, to come back to this subject, I think it's hard to tell a client no, I guess, or at least it can start to, until you get practice. So I guess that's kind of my next point too, is like, I guess it takes practice, right?
Yeah, practice makes perfect, but like, how often do you want to tell a client no?
Right, exactly. Because it's tough, right? If you start to say no more than you say yes, I've always learned that that's a good way to turn people off, right?
Yeah.
So it's a delicate balance, right? So how do you handle that, I guess, when they're saying dumb things, but that half of those dumb things really will need to happen? How do you handle that?
I mean, like, first we have to set the stage. Like, who is the client? How desperate do we need them? Where are we involved in this stage? Are we like the guy who's shooting the shots, or are we just like a wheel on the cog? That is like where I'm like, sometimes I confuse the two. Like, I'm the expert and I should tell the client what to do because they expect that.
Right.
But then there's also situations where the client thinks he's the expert and he wants to say what he wants. So especially in videography, it's like you do what the client wants or you do what you want, because it's like, you either make art that is like highly specific to you, or you sell a product that is highly specific to them.
Well, exactly, and I love that you brought that up. That it's not all about you, right? I've run into that even myself a few times, where something doesn't meet my level of quality, but that doesn't necessarily mean it doesn't meet the audience's level of quality, right? I think we've talked about it before, that sometimes things can be too perfect, and so there's that balance, right?
Yeah, my favorite actually is like when you have like those Instagram accounts and have all those branded, really nicely polished, like, profiles, and then it's just like, yeah, this is perfect. It's too perfect. This could be like from a bot, and now it's just like you need a little bit rough around the edges in a way.
Yeah, and I think for me, like, I'm someone that I think is very guilty of trying to control the whole thing, right? I don't like to lose control over stuff, so I a lot of the times in a project have to kind of be like, it's okay, just let it go. Like, sometimes things need to be a little rough, right? So there's a lot of, and for me, I tell people like, if you're ever in a meeting and a client says something, but they're in that flow state again, they're moving, they're loving it, and you don't want to interrupt that, is write it down, right? So if I have a problem with something you say, that's when I'll kind of take a note, like, and so if it's really bad, I'll address it later, because, if you interrupt that flow state, it's pretty bad, right? When people feel like they can't be creative anymore.
Yeah, I feel like also like meetings are like a very weird thing, because like on the one side, yes, meetings are kind of needed, but sometimes they're just like, nothing is happening. And I kind of hate that aspect about meetings. And when you write those things down, it's like, okay, now I have a list and more problems than I had, before, what is kind of annoying.
Yeah. Well, exactly. And yeah, and it is interesting, those meetings where you go in with zero problems and you leave the meeting with all these problems.
You're just like, oh, I fought with Gucci.
Yeah, it's really funny because, yeah, kickstart meetings, like, when you're kicking off a project, can be really exciting. It can be like, oh man, we're really jiving, we're moving 1,000 miles per hour. But it's funny, those kickoff meetings where you leave and you're like, we were going to be 1,000 miles per hour, but now I feel like I'm gonna have to write some emails, I'm gonna have to do some phone calls. Like,
yeah, that is like one of the things where it's like, okay, should you actually even speak up on the meeting? That's like another thing. Like, how important is the problem? That is like another thing. Like, having problems, like, sometimes it's better to not even mention them. Sometimes we can fix them in post. I don't know how that is on the web design, thing, where you can address things later. But I personally think, like, not all problems need to be addressed instantly. You can just fix them in a way, but yeah, sometimes you have to speak up and say, like,
100%.
Yeah.
Well, 100%, yeah. And I mean, I think in website world, it's change logs, right? It's we launch and then we have an update and another update. It's like video games. You're probably used to that, where like every video game has updates, right? It doesn't ever launch perfect either. So in the web design world, it is definitely built in. What can be hard is teaching the client that that you're interrupting the flow state now, right?
Yeah.
That's the hardest thing too, is when you're flowing and the client's like, no. And before you know it, you're like, you're having a hard time.
Yeah, I think like it's a hard balance to have, like I said, like, videography is like either art or business, and sometimes it's mixed, so it can be very confusing.
Oh yeah.
Where it's like, oh, I'm just making a beautiful video that I like, and it's like artistic, or I make a solution-based, like, cookie cutter project, and obviously there's a place and time for everything. I don't know how you decide where you have to speak up and where you don't have to speak up. What are you like, okay, what are your non-negotiables where you speak up?
It's a great point. I think when we're at that 1,000-mile view, and the way that I kind of, because yet again, you don't want to stop that flow state. You don't want to get them to feel like they have the wrong answers and that they shouldn't speak up. So it's when we're having like the high level ideas, right? Like let's do this project, or let's do this project. Like, we need more sales, so let's make a video, for example. That's when I'll kind of pause them and be like, okay, that's not a bad idea. And I'll kind of start with that. Like, I'm not saying no to that idea, but let's entertain some other things. Do we need a video? Would this maybe be a better, like, splash page? Or would this maybe be a better email? And so I think that's when I'll kind of stop them, is when we're at the top of the river. Because as you know, if you let it go then, like, it's like a degree off now, but then in about an hour, we're going to be miles away from where we should have been.
Yeah, I love that. That's like a really good, thing to look out for, because like, it is easy to do things and get distracted and then be like, okay, we're going everywhere, but actually we're going nowhere. What is like terrible. And I'm very guilty of that, because like, I get always like the 1,000-mile view, but my view is like, we're already there, and so we want to get this and this and this done as soon as possible. But should we actually focus first on the one thing and go all the way to the top and then do the next thing? That is like,
Yeah, and with that, I do want to bring up a point too of allowing the tangents too. I've had to get better at that as a creator. When I was coming out of art school, I was very like, no, let's stay on topic. But then I did realize that we lost a lot of the fun ideas then. So it's always about reeling it back, which is interesting. I'm trying to get better at that, right? Even in these podcasts where we can go off the rails, but then can we bring it back to the subject? And that can sometimes be tough, right? Especially if people are really jiving about something brand new and they're really going back and forth, and you got to be like the guy that's like, all right, guys, let's get back to what we're talking about.
Yeah, that is actually a good segue to like segues, because like, it's all a balance, like how much you do one thing versus the other. And our thing is like, sometimes we get in our flow and we ramble on the podcast. So comment down below if you kind of noticed anything, or if not, let us know what's going on. But basically, like, you get into the flow state and it's just like, oh, it's very interesting to talk about that topic, but some people might be not really deep into it, and it's just like they're already done with it, so you have to have the with the client specifically, we're doing a little bit of that, and then we're doing a little bit of that, and it's like all balanced.
Yeah. And you know what really helps me that I honestly don't do as well as I used to is kind of having like a predefined template for these meetings, right? So I have my minimum questions we need to ask, because sometimes you'll do this whole meeting, and what's so funny is it's the meetings you leave excited and happy sometimes are the worst meetings. It's weird to say, like, you get in your car and you're like, that went great, everyone's happy, they're gonna pay the deposit, everything's freaking amazing.
Yeah.
But little do you know, you didn't actually get answers to the questions you should have gotten, right? And so when I started out, I used to have a piece of paper where it like literally would have the same questions on it, you know, and they could be easy ones, like, right, like timeline, budget, key stakeholders. And you'd be surprised how many of those you forget to ask when you're in that flow state, right? You're not asking them like, okay, who are the people that are reviewing the project, right? What's the timeline of the project, right? How are we going to handle me getting paid?
Well, that should be number one on the meeting, because, you know, we don't mess around with that. I'm just kidding.
Get paid. But yeah, so it's like, you know, so I actually need to bring that back. I've actually found some client meetings recently where I'm like, oh, I actually have to send them another email because I didn't ask them a question. And as you know, with some CEOs, you only get that meeting. They don't got time to answer the emails after the meeting.
I'm getting used to this now, because like with my new client, it's like, yep, you get the minimum attention that you can get, and
Right.
they don't mean it bad, but it's just like, well, they don't have time. They're doing 20 bazillion things, and now here you are trying to cramp everything in a meeting, but you forget it. So a to-do list and a checklist in general, this is a good advice, Sean.
Yeah, I need to take it. But
Me too.
but you know, so and with that being said, one of the important questions I would ask in a meeting too is, you know, if they are busy, if you are talking to the CEO, you know, ask them, who under you can I ask for some of this information? Is there someone that can give me some of this stuff? And you know, and you kind of do it from a place of empathy. I know you're really busy, Fitze. I know that you're running this whole international company. Is there someone under you? Do you have an assistant?
Yeah, a couple under the table. No, I'm just kidding.
Oh, what the heck? but you know, so you know, but like, do you have people under you that I can talk to? Can I not waste your time? And a lot of the time they're like, yeah, and they'll call them in, or they'll do something. And I found that person's the best person. I work okay with CEOs, but I work really well with their assistants, are like the person that's kind of under them.
I kind of can see that. Like, you're very organized, and you're like, you know, like I'm really into like the systems, processes, and that's where I'm slacking. I'm really good with like the CEO coming up ideas, because like I like ideas and like what it could be. What is like very, you know, vague. But I mean, like, it's always like there's like, you need both, you know, so it's like none is like better than the other, so it's like kind of rough.
Yeah, it's a balance, right? And you know, in a perfect world, we'd both be in a meeting, right? You'd have that guy, and you'd have both guys, and we wouldn't be talking over each other. And like, you know, I would be able to go in and ask like those things, but then in the corner, you're over there like showing the CEO a new technology that's existing and getting him excited. You know, in agencies, you see that a lot, right? That's why the creative is different than the project manager, right? So the project manager is your analytic guy, timeline guy, budget guy, and then the creative's allowed to just have the creative conversations, which is really nice.
That brings me to a point that I kind of want to ask like the people in the comments. Comment down below if you notice that if a company becomes really big, the creative people will get basically drowned out by all the system makers. Like, everybody builds the process and systems, and then it's like too corporate, and there's no, you know, flexibility. Let's try this, you know, and it's just like you get paralyzed by all those systems in place, and it kills invention. But that's kind of how I feel.
You know, it does. And I think one thing you'll find a lot in agencies, and I'm not sure if this really is unique to when I started working, but I feel like it really started to take off once I started working professionally, is the idea of the Agile methodology. So a lot of agencies use an Agile type of view when they make teams. And so what do I mean by that? So the old process, like back in, you know, let's say 60s or 70s in an ad agency, was that like, we have a client, Heinz Ketchup, right? You are assigned to that account going forward forever, right? But what they found is then you get people ingrained, right? And then you're under the account exec, and then he's the one that's guiding all the creative. You're not being able to guide the creative. So what a lot of agencies do now is they do an agile kind of flow where you work on Heinz for a month, and then we're pushing you to another project. And so you never have the exact team. You're always moving around, and what that allows is, first off, the creative never gets bored. You're always keeping your mind fresh on a new project, but also it doesn't allow people to get ingrained on top of you. You don't feel like, oh, well, Frank above me is always the account exec and he never lets me talk to the client, and this is just how it's going to be going forward. It's like, no, that was on Heinz. Now you're on a different project, different account exec, different client. And so I feel like that works really well. I when I started doing that, getting in the workforce, I just could feel that it was nice. I'd be on one project and feel really trapped, and then the next week they'd put me on another project and I'm like, whew, free. Whew.
Yeah. I mean, like, that is really good for the workflow in general, and just like feeling good, like having like a little bit of excitement, like, you're trying new things are happening, and new environment. But yeah, change is coming, and change is a good thing. Yeah.
Change? Oh, okay.
Yeah.
What do you mean by that?
Segments, because like I feel like I want to know about the book that you brought out. Tell me about the book, because I saw it and I really liked the design, and it reminded me of Milka, the company in Germany where it's like a big chocolate company where they have a purple cow. So
interesting. Okay, yeah. So so for everyone out there, Seth Godin, I have a few of his books. He's a marketing genius, but Purple Cow is an amazing book. A very simple book. I love Seth Godin's books because they're all so small. You could read them on an airplane ride. But what's cool about Purple Cow, I would say the entire point of this book is creating something remarkable, right? And how right now in the internet world, in the world of social media, a lot of us tend to want to follow the trends, right? So right now that's AI. Right now that's, it's whatever. It's X, Y, and Z where, oh, I saw that on Instagram. Now I'm going to do that. Or, oh, I see this product. I'm going to go for that product. Yeah. Where in this book, he said, Seth Godin's making the point, in a large way that doing something remarkable is not as risky as you may think. That and that, so for example, like an example he has in the book is, the paint industry. So the paint industry didn't change for hundreds of years. A paint bucket has been the same since 1900 to now. It's hard to pour. It's hard to open. It's hard to keep closed. There's all these problems with it. So then there was one paint company, I think Maxwell, that was like, you know what? Let's change the packaging, right? Because nobody gives a crap about the bucket. They just use the bucket to get the paint to the thing. Ooh. So can we make that better? Can we just make that experience better? And then that quadrupled their profits, just making an easy pour can, and that's it. And so it's like, can you make a part of what you sell remarkable? Is there something you do that can become remarkable?
Oh, I like that, because like books have like such knowledge and like nuggets sometimes in there. Mm-hmm. We always hear like stuff and we don't implement it. So it's like one thing you learn something new, but like books are like amazing because you find those nuggets and it's like, oh, maybe I just have to package my video package a little bit different and it's like converting better, or maybe I have to change the logo a little bit and it pops more, or all the fancy words for
well, and it's the things that like a logical thinking person would be like, oh, that's a waste of time, like that has nothing to do with the project, but it's the touch points that really make the difference. There was this girl that I went to school with. She was this cute like Thai girl, and she was just this little like joyful girl, and she like did so good at creating stuff, and she would just beat us up in the critiques. Like the teachers loved her stuff, tear my stuff off the wall, and just like praise her. But one thing that she did when we would have like a guest come in, like a famous designer would come in, and we'd all be nervous, we'd all be dressing nice, we'd have our business cards ready. But you know what she would do? She would make an origami thing for that person that they would unfold, and it would just like and it had all these cute little stickers in it and candy, like little Asian candy, and she gave that to every single guest. And so she actually got in with these famous designers, and now she's like in these amazing agencies. And is it because she's an amazing designer? Yeah, but is she better than any of us were in the room? Maybe, but maybe not. What it was she did something remarkable. We're all sitting there with like a business card, a little rectangle piece of paper, thinking that's going to be remarkable. And she went out of her way to make origami, to put all these special things in there, and even put the guy's name in there.
Dang.
And that's special.
Yeah, it's like the little things that go far, like we do that with our Etsy orders. Like we have like our online shop, and we're shipping stuff out. The easiest way to get like reviews on Etsy is like to do something personable, so you basically just sign the shipping label. personal with like hand drawn, not like printed with like a thank you note. No, hand drawn.
Yeah.
Thank you for your purchase. Thank you for this, or because like right now we're real people selling real things.
100%.
And it's like we're not at the scale where it's like, okay, we need to ship out 10,000 products, so we should not act like it, because like that's the other thing, If you become too corporate and you don't do the special things, it's planned.
It is. It's true. I mean, it's true, and it's dry. We live in such a dry world now. I feel like everything's Helvetica. Everything is like this very simplistic, modern. Like everyone's trying to be safe. Everyone's trying to be vanilla. Nobody even in the things they say, they don't want to offend you, or they don't want to, So one thing I used to say when I was in the print industry a lot more is, when the first email came out, it was a big deal. When people got their first email, they were like, "Whoa, I got an email." Now you get an email, you're like, "Nah, who cares?" But if I give you a handwritten note, now it's special. Something that lost its value has now come back.
I'm like kind of want to push back a little bit on the email part, because like I'm noticing like I still react really positively to emails. Like now I'm like on Instagram, there's messages. You maybe react to them or you maybe don't, but like on the emails, I check my emails pretty often, and it's like it's like I think like it's now the real messages. It's like mail letters. Email is now so official because you use it for everything that it's like, I gotta check my emails. So it's like, I think it's more important than it ever was.
I do want to talk about that for a second, because I like that you're saying that, because I feel like when I first met you, I don't think you would have said that. I think you were more message. You were like, everything's done in messages, but I've always felt like emails make it more legitimate. I just feel like if you're going to be a client and we're actually going to do something, you're going to spend thousands of dollars to do this, it just doesn't, it feels weird being written in messages to me. And I know it's still just written word, but it just doesn't, it feels too casual for me. It feels like stuff's going to get lost for some reason.
Yeah, it's also like when you go to court, you don't show the DMs, you're just like, you show rather the emails because it looks a little bit better. But hey, he said this in chat, let me scroll up there. It would be like kind of odd. But yeah, there's a formalness to emails and the importantness. So
100%. So for people out there, let's say you just landed a client, and you're going through the phase where they're signing contracts or doing deposits. I would suggest doing that all through email anytime you can, because that actually holds up in court. I've had problems with people paying, and what got them to pay is when they know that I had those emails. There was one time sort of recently where the lawyer sent the email that they said, "Yes, I agree to this. This is perfect. Let's move forward." And it's like, it's in an email, man. You agreed to it. And so that, while it's maybe not as strong as a contract, it's still a written agreement.
Yeah, I mean, like, a contract is relative. Like, contracts can be broken if they're wrongly written and whatever. So it's like, a word is word, and especially if it's written down. So use the emails, guys.
Yeah. And there's metadata in emails, so you can't really fake it. Now that's it's the same with social media too. But I think what's weird about social media is it's a little hidden. You can't unless you're like a government agency or the police or something, you can't send an email to Instagram to output your conversation with timestamps. They're not going to do that.
Yeah, but back to the book, because what is another good lesson that you learned from this one? Because I'm like all about the nuggets. I like watching the YouTube compilations of books where they make combine all the key knowledges. But it's not the same as if you would read it. If you read it, you take the information and you process it completely by yourself.
Yeah.
And you spend more time learning about the topic versus like, here's like 10 facts. They go there in and they're out, and that's it.
Yeah. So I think one of the terms, and by the way, I love this book. And I'm going to talk Seth Godin up again because he breaks this down. This book is built into sections. And so there's been times I've only read 2 pages and be like, I really need to sit with that. And I feel like I've become more of that reader. I used to be someone that's like, I just want to read front to back as quickly as possible. Now I'll literally read 2 pages and be like, let that sink in. That was actually a big thing.
That was deep.
That was deep. And I got to do stuff. So that's all the reading I can do. But one term in this book that I love that he says is who you want to target's the sneezers. And I think obviously we just came out of a pandemic. So I think we can all kind of relate to the idea of like, when you sneeze, you're spreading, you're spreading your virus. But when
positivity. You're spreading positivity.
Yeah, we're spreading positivity, flowers and rainbows. And, and so when we're marketing, we're trying to do the same thing, right? So a lot of us, when we're trying to market something, we're trying to put it in the place everyone else is marketing, right? So if you're looking for a job, you're like, well, let's go on, Indeed, and let's apply where everyone else is applying. And then we're going to get surprised when we're not picked, when we're doing everything everyone else is doing. Where what this guy is saying is, you need to find the guy that is the power user, or the guy that's passionate about this. You don't want an audience that's casually into this. What you want is the guy that's trying to be on the cutting edge, who's willing to try new things. And not only that, but he's going to sneeze to his friends. He's going to talk about you. He's going to be like, I just got this product. So there's another example in this where they talk about Krispy Kreme donuts. What does Krispy Kreme donuts do when they go to a new town? Well, they give away 1,000 free donuts. And why do they do that? Because they want you to come. They want you to be excited. You're going to get a free donut. And then what are you going to do? You're going to tell your friend you just got a free donut.
I got to flex on the boys. It ain't easy. Yeah. Can I actually get the book? I'm like, I like good books, and I'm just like, okay, we should have an Amazon affiliate for this. Oh, here's the bookmark in there, and let us read actually ideas that spread. Oh, okay, that's where it came from. The sneezers are a key spreading agent of an antivirus.
But yeah, so for people out there, for young creatives that are watching this podcast, and you're out there and you're like, dang, how do I get clients? I'm going on Indeed, or like I'm going to networking events, and getting that page ASMR.
Smells like a book. I love the smell of good books.
But so instead, think of like what can you do to target the sneezers, right? Who's the sneezer for you? So for me, I'm a web designer, right? I'm trying to find clients that are kind of they're kind of new businesses, right? They don't want to do stuff the way that everyone else has done it. They don't want to just make a boring templated website. They want to, what I'm looking for is the storytellers. I'm looking for the people that want to do something remarkable. Those are the sneezers. And the cool thing about that is once you find that person and you do such a bang up job for them, then they will attract other remarkable people.
Yeah, we actually talked about it, like finding your cheerleaders, because like that's the people who, you do work with them, and they are just like, oh, tell everybody on Facebook, oh, he was so good, he did this, and oh, thank you for that. And it's like, whoa, that are the people where you have to double down if you want growth, because they 100%. They will support you, they will throw the message out there, and you're just like, all you have to do is like your work. Where other people, they're just like, thank you for your work.
Right.
And they're satisfied. Nothing is wrong. But
right.
They're not the type of person who's like actively going out. And there's like different people for everything. So it's like sometimes it's good to know who are the cheerleaders, what type of people are around you and with who you work.
Yeah, and so another big point in this book that I do want to get to too is that a lot of people, and actually Lindsay had said this on our last podcast a little bit, is when you're marketing a product, the best way to market a product is to bake the marketing into the product itself. If the product sucks, it doesn't matter how good the marketing is. Yeah. So I've been trying to think about that, me as a designer, right? So like, so even when we have guests on this podcast, I've kind of talked about how I even have a checklist of like, I make sure to say thank you. I make sure to tell those guests when the episodes are on, because that's the product we're selling. If the product isn't good, it doesn't matter how our SEO is and all that stuff. Like, if it sucks, it sucks. And so I think for us, like, we always have conversations in this podcast of like, how do we make the podcast better? Because if the podcast is better, if the product's better, the marketing almost doesn't even need to be there, because it's going to spread on its own if it's amazing.
Oh, we talked about those pictures. If you're like a picture perfect girl, it's really easy to grow because like the product is good, and it's like good design. If you're like very pretty, it's really easy to grow on social media. If you're not, then it's like, okay, now you have to compensate with quality. And that's where you're like, okay, now we have to have the checklist. We have to have this. We have to have that, But if you're ultra entertaining, then you kind of like, that's bonus points. But it's like, it's super hard to do.
It is. And, and we could dive a little bit into that. I think it's interesting, the kind of the hot girl on Instagram, and there's probably hot boys too. It just that kind of the look, the visual is so big now, right? Like if you look like an actor but you're doing something people are attracted. But I think it's a little dangerous though. I may be wrong, but I feel like if people come attracted because you're hot, you're like a hot painter, are they there for the painting, I guess? And
that is the thing, like that is the curse that they have. Usually they are not that talented, like, sorry for throwing shade, but it's like, you know, you kind of get lazy because you get everything for free, you know? So it's like, you know, if you don't have to work for it and it's just like you get it, it doesn't mean that they're bad, but it's like you will be not on the same level as somebody who is like, has less benefits basically, and they're just like they have to push 100%. Way harder and they have to spend more time where 100%. You know, it's like it is a trade-off, but if they are smart then they can compensate for that. But it's like, you know, there's like we have so many stats as a person where it's like you got to focus on your, you know, on your knowledge, so that you just have that, then you have your entertainment, charisma, then you have like the you know, the skill itself, whatever it is, you know, and you have to build everything out. But if people come to you just for the looks, they ignore your art, but they give you the attention, and you maybe misinterpret that as like, oh, yeah, I'm good. You know, How do you read the feedback? You can't. You know?
Such a great point. Such a great point. I mean, even in this podcast, you've always brought up the really good point of like, don't get stuck in the numbers. The numbers mean almost nothing. Like, don't sit there and think that just because the likes are going up, just because you're getting more comments, that it's actually leading to a better business. It may not be. You know, this you actually need to turn over stuff. You actually need to have stuff work when you get these views. You know, I think that's the interesting thing you see. You know, when you have the hot girl or the hot boy and they get all this stuff, but it's like, is it closing though as much as it could, right? Like if you're getting 50,000 people liking something, you should be closing a lot more. Why not? Well, then it's probably because you're not actually selling the thing you're trying to sell.
Also, you need to know how to sell stuff and have stuff to sell, because that is also like a thing. If you're like just like getting cloud fame for just like doing modern things, or you know what I mean. So it's basically like you get the cloud, but you don't have a system in place because you never really had to thought about making a living off that, you know. So if you're kind of entitled for like good upbringing and you have money, and it's just like now you're running a big account with like not pulling in the money that you could pull in because you never was poor, you know. So it's like there's like levels of effectiveness, you know. So it's kind of good to be handicapped, but it's the long game in a way.
It is the long game. I mean, so you know, I have a friend, you know, we'll probably have him on the podcast here eventually, where he's learning to be a developer, right? And right now he's a general manager at Subway, you know, so he's just working at Subway. He gets yelled at homeless people all day. He's just making sandwiches, and then at night, all night, he's learning how to code, right?
Yeah.
And you know, and he got discouraged. We were just talking last night, and he was just like, "Yeah, man, I just don't know how I'm going into these interviews with people that have 4-year degrees and have done all these jobs," and I'm like, "Yeah, but guess what though? Half these people have never worked a real job. You know, they had mom and dad pay for college, straight from college went to the office job, and they've never made less than $50,000 a year. But you're hardcore. You know what's at stake. And I think when people forget what's at stake, they lose that drive. And so for any of you guys out there, if you don't have a lot of money, you don't have the tech, you just live in a place where your creativity isn't really at your fingertips, you know, just know that you're being hardened by that. You're becoming like a really powerful person. You're building muscles that someone in a cushy job just doesn't have. So
yeah, on that note, I kind of want to jump into, because like it maybe resonates with a lot of people, because like there's different routes that you can go for your career. There's like the safe way, go to school, you know, get your degree, and then go from there through like the path that is like kind of predetermined, you know. But you also can go the other path. It's like I'm doing learning by myself, and I'm making projects, getting paid for projects, unless you need a degree for that type of work, you know.
Right.
There's restrictions for certain things, but in art it's pretty free. You can create a good art piece, but you have to have projects. And for coding, for example, I feel like if you worked on a couple projects, they will ignore like, oh, you didn't do your 4 years, but you show like, oh, I did this, and I did this, and this was like really complicated to do, and they are like, whoa, how did you do that? You're nearly hired for that, you know.
100%, you know, and that's kind of what I've been telling him, is just make more. I mean, it's really something that you've helped awaken in me with this podcast of like, just put out the episodes. Like, it's, you know, you've got to just put out more stuff. And what's funny is he's already, you know, he's going to meetups and stuff, and he's done more than some of these people that have a 4-year degree, where they're like, oh my God, I've had 4 years and this guy's already kind of ahead of me, because he's just doing it. He's just, and that's kind of what I told him, is like, if you're ever stuck, just spend an hour. How fast can you get fast at something? Then just set up a website quicker, get better at stuff, so you're just like fast, you know. It's weird. I always bring up Space Jam. At the very beginning of Space Jam the movie, it shows like a young Michael Jordan. He's a little kid, and he's out there like he's shooting hoops out at night at the basket, and he's like missing missing it, and his dad comes out, and he's, you know, and he gives him kind of a pep talk, and but I love that visual of like, we all need to be that kid that's just shooting hoops all night, missing. Oop, I got one, miss, and you got to grind. I think we live in a time where people don't want to grind. They want that success quickly.
Yeah, and also like it seems like people get the success quickly, but it is like I think like the best example is like the Bobbi Althoff girl. You saw her with like the dry comedy and whatever.
Yeah, Bobbi Althoff. So for anyone out there that is under a podcast rock, you know, she's interviewed Drake was one of her biggest things, but she's carved through kind of a lot of big names in the rap world, and Mark Cuban, and it's interesting because
it seems like she came out of nowhere, but actually the backstory is she did not really. So there was like some stories where she's like going to the comedy clubs, you know, and then it came out that she's viral on TikTok, and you know, so she did a lot of things beforehand, and that is like basically like an amplifier, you know. They're maybe not immediately helping starting a podcast and getting Drake on it, but if like you already have a TikTok following that you built over 10 years or not 10 years, but you know what I mean, over a couple of years,
right?
And then you start something new, the chances are way higher that like the people who like you for this accidentally find you over there, and it's like, whoa, you know. So it's like it amplifies whatever you do, but people will see like on YouTube, like, she just did a podcast, how did she grow to that size, you know? And obviously she was not dumb, and she had like smart ideas about marketing. Like there was an interview where she went through the strategy, how she got like Drake on it, and it's like, I was like impressed, you know?
Yeah. The bootstrapping. Yeah, I think maybe it's the same interview I saw, but yeah, I thought it was interesting too, where she said, you know, I put out money. I made no money on this podcast. She
spent money, big bucks.
I put thousands of, but you know, and I think people out there would be like, you know, poo that because like, well, I don't have money, I can't do that, and fair. But you know, it's interesting where it shows that it's half measures don't work, right? You need to go full in. Are we doing this? Or are we not doing this? And it seems like she took that, like, we're doing this. I'm going to put thousands of dollars on guests, and I'm going to get them on the podcast. And I think she's easily made that money back.
Yeah, on that note, also like, let's say money, because money is like a big one, but how many people actually do a post or actually do share a thing, you know? It's like, it's just work, you know, and like, or tag a person or ask a person, can you do me a favor? It does not even have to have money involved, because like we can use that as an excuse, like she had enough money to do that, you know, but she actually thought about a concept like, how do I get a person to share my post or connect me with X, Y, and Z? And that's kind of what she did really well. And I'm like, she put in the work, and she thought about that, and the thinking and actually putting in the work is more important than like what vehicle you use, you know, and using money versus like using favors of a friend, you know?
Yeah, and again, I kind of want to bring it back to being remarkable. Like, why is her podcast doing well as well? Well, it's because they're awkward, and they're awkward on purpose. Like, you would think, like, if you're starting a brand new podcast, you would want to be like, you know, kind of how we are. We're like, okay, well, let's try to relate to the guest.
We'll be formal.
Let's be really nice to them. Let's make sure this podcast, because if there's any awkward times, we'll cut those out. But no, she's definitely like, the first one she ever did was with Rick Glassman, which I'm a pretty big fan of Take Your Shoes Off podcast. It's a great podcast, and he's a comedian. He's done a lot of different stuff, and it was so great because he does this very deadpan awkwardness, and he does this thing where he goes in and out of being serious, where you don't know if he's being serious or not. And she handled it so well, where even throughout it, she's like, you know, this is the second time I've cried in this podcast, you know, and I'm you know, and you almost see like this passive like argument happening in this weird way, and it's really cool to kind of see like she could have made it, you know, very normal, very safe, very normal, but she made it awkward, and that made it remarkable. That made me keep watching.
Is that actually now the purple cow?
Is awkwardness?
Yeah, no.
Maybe.
I mean, that was her purple cow. She did something special, something weird, unique on the podcast. I'm like, you could consider that as like, you know, instead of like doing the great podcast, you know, she called it a very great podcast, and the opposite. Let's make it as terrible as it is, because that's, you know.
Yeah, and one part of it that I really like too is when she asks them for money. Every single person, she's like, how much money do you have? And they're like, I don't know, I don't really know. She's like, you don't know how much money money you have? You have a lot. Why don't you know? And they're like, okay, well, I have maybe this much. He's like, can I have some? And it's like, and I just like love that because like we all kind of think that a little bit when if we ever podcast someone who's like super rich, they're just like, can we have some?
I mean, like it's obviously like the thing that you shouldn't do, you know, because everybody does it. But sooner or later, because she gets those guests, so some of them will be saying like, yeah, sure.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, even like, you know, so she interviewed Tyga, and so she did it at a zoo. I'm like, just like, and he's just awkwardly like, and I just love that. Like, you know, like don't interview Tyga with like his crew and he's let's do it in a zoo where he's just like awkwardly like, and that was like a 35-minute podcast, but I was like blown away by how short that podcast was, but how much was in 35 minutes. Like,
yeah, I'll believe it.
So, you know, so anyway, it's that kind of energy of like, you know, if you're going to swing for the fence, right? Like let's be remarkable. Let's do something crazy. Let's do something risky.
I think it also goes back like experiment, you know, because we talked about that a lot, that you have to do the work, you know, do some research and innovate, you know, and innovate is like trying new things out and being like, let's do crazy. But if you innovate, you're usually like too safe, you know, and we forget that we're like, okay, if I edit now a video, I maybe do color shift, you know, or try this LUT or try this transition instead of like, oh no, let's try something crazy, you know?
Yeah, well, I think it's innovate, but what does innovate mean? I think that's the thing that changes, right? I think some people think of innovation as making more perfect and more and just more safe, and yeah, maybe innovation is not that. Maybe innovation is breaking the mold, right?
Yeah.
So, you know, I know for our podcast we kind of talk about that from time to time of like, you know, what are ways that we can break what we're doing and do something new, right?
Yeah.
Because, you know, we haven't quite made it, right? We get maybe 100 views on a video on all the platforms combined. You know, maybe we get like thousands of views a month, but we're still in that place where we're even like, you know, how do we make this more remarkable? How do we?
Yeah, so there's always like, you know, outliers there where it's like, okay, you do one thing and it works really well, you know, and it's like kind of hard to guess what will perform well. But that's an experiment phase where it's like, okay, we try this, we try that, you know,
right.
And after you went through that, then the game completely changes. You know, people don't know how the internet works. You know, they maybe do a post, they maybe do this, and it's not working.
Right.
And all the posts that leads up to like being consistently viral or successful or figuring something out, you have all that back knowledge of the failures, you know, and we're in that failure stage. But as soon as the one thing makes click, you know, then you're just like, oh, we already figured all those other things out on the way, you know. So it's like, then it's like, oh, success is instant. So that's like the weird thing on the internet, because then it pops up everywhere.
Yeah. Well, it's consistency. I mean, there's at least a lot of examples of that from Mr. Beast to onward, of people that, you know, they made videos on YouTube that nobody cared about for years. And, you know, it's that kind of saying that you have to be good daily to be great once. And I think that there is something to that, right? That you have to keep trying to improve the thing, even with no audience, even with nobody caring. You have to just keep it moving, keep improving it. And then one day it'll be the thing. And what's funny is the things that have happened in my career that were like the home runs, there was nothing unique about them. It was just like the same thing I'd done a million times, but I just happened to do it right at the right time, and then it blew up.
Yeah.
And so that seems to be the case, right? Is if you just do it enough, eventually and you keep innovating, like don't just do the same thing, but you keep innovating, getting better and better, it'll surprise you. One day you're like, oh, it's a home run.
Yeah.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and then it seems like, oh, it came out of nowhere. How did that happen? You know, and nobody will pay credit for like, oh, you did like videos for like 7-8 years, and you know, or built 200 websites or 100, you know, or 50, whatever it is.
Right.
It's like, oh yeah, I never saw them. You know, you will not see them. It's like success is quiet in a way.
Yeah. And with that being said too, I and this is a little bit more off topic, but we're like, and a little unique to the podcasting world is, you know, we live in a time where everyone's becoming a podcaster, right? Like we're living in a time where it's about to be inundated and very saturated with people talking all the time. So I think to be remarkable, something I've been talking and thinking about is, you know, viewing things as facets, right? So you have a podcast, but like, can you also have other things? And it feels like when you have other things and people make those connections, right? Like I watch your podcast, but then I just went to your art show, and then you just were over here. I feel like that's the strength. That's that helps everything.
Yeah, so that is like kind of where I'm like going back into like being broke and like knowing a lot about, using tools correctly, because like you can have a podcast and you can get no views, what is most likely for everybody like the thing that's gonna happen. But what do you do with that? Because like if you can showcase like, oh, we got 50 episodes, so it looks legit,
Right.
Oh, we have guests on, it looks even more legit. Now it's like, oh, sponsors will be like, this is pretty dope. I want to be on there, or I want to host it because they have people on there, so they must have X, Y, and Z. So that is like the thing, like, and that is just one way of monetizing it. Then there's another way is like, hey, I want to invite cool people. Now I'm bounding with cool people in person, and
Right.
then they later convert into like paying clients, because I had like, for example, Miss Grant International on my podcast, and now she's my client, and I'm like, now I have to edit for her, and I'm just like,
Yeah.
But that's the long play, there's like so many ways where people are like, oh, it's saturated, it's not saturated, it's just like, nah, just do the thing because it is useful if you use it to its full potential, and that's
Right.
like the thing.
Yeah, I mean, if we're talking about people just recording themselves on mics and camera, it's saturated. But if we talk about people that are trying to create a community of creatives around them, then it's not saturated. There's very few people that are actually doing that well, probably.
Yeah, so that is like the other thing. Like there's like, it goes really deep. Like I have that one thing with my buddy. He was like into videography with like performance for fire spinning and whatever. And he's like, in that thing is no money,
Yeah.
And he already figured out like 2 ways to make money, but there's like 7-8 other ways to make money, and he never really discovered them because he's just like was just disappointed with it. And I'm just like, hey, you also could make a YouTube channel about this, you could make courses about this, you could reach out for sponsors where it's like, hey, they have the props and you provide them. You can use them as models. I could go on,
Yeah, and with that, I do want to say to anyone out there, don't forget to brainstorm. I mean, there's times I have to remind myself that, like, when I'm just like, ugh, what's next? It's like, well, put a timer on for 2 minutes, get a blank piece of paper, and give as many crazy, and get the crazy ones out there. Get anything out of your brain on that piece of paper. You'll be surprised what you write down.
Yeah.
There's always an angle. There's always some. So if engagement's down, you're not getting enough money, you could figure it out. And obviously, I think this all goes without saying, but you kind of got to do love what you're doing too. I think there's a lot of people out there. I've talked to a few in the coding world where I've like asked them like, okay, so you're kind of passionate about coding. They're like, not really. It's just the easiest way to make money. And I kind of tell them, you're probably not going to make it then. They're like, well, why? And I'm like, because the first time
you're going to die.
Because you're going to get slammed. Like, it's just going to happen. Any career path, there's going to be that time someone's going to dunk on you and you're going to feel like crap. And if you don't love it, that's when you're going to be like, you know what? I could just sell insurance. So, and that's also why I tell people, if you're in the creative world to make money, that's great, but there is career paths where you can make money a lot easier. So if you're in this path to make money easier, you're in the wrong path.
Yeah, so we like to make our money really hard, so this is why we're here.
That's why we're here.
We thought it's easy, but actually, no.
We are trying to make money with a free podcast, so
yeah, that is actually also like an interesting concept. Everything nowadays moves into free, like free ebooks, free courses, free, free podcasts, free knowledge. Everything is free, and and it's like, how much can you give? And that is like the biggest problem now with that new economy. Even games are free because like they sell you on the back end somewhere in the funnel. Like, oh yeah, here's actually the free product. You like it, but you want that skin, you want this, you want that. So it's like it's a weird economy where everything is free, and you have to figure out like, how do you make that, worthwhile? And I feel like also like the longer you stick with something, the easier it is to find new ways of monetizing it, because you really know who has money, who does not have money, what works, what doesn't work, where is actually the value proposition. But you really have to look out for it, and you kind of have to figure it out, But you will not do that on your first gig and be like, oh, this is like a gold mine. If you're lucky, maybe,
but yeah, probably not, right? And another funny thing that I feel like I keep running into is people give away a lot of free stuff, but it's actually really a tiny amount of free stuff with a lot of cushion, right? So we've all seen those videos where it's 10 minutes long, but the real point of the video was really 20 seconds. The good advice was 20 seconds, but they somehow, the whole point of the video is to get you to watch the whole 10 minutes. And for all of you out there, I wouldn't do that if I were you, because I'll tell you what, it's like you make me fall in love with you for that 10 seconds, and then after 3 minutes of you just doing a lot of cushion, I fall out of love with you. So I would say that to people too. And something we can even get better at as well, admittedly, is get to the dang point. Like, what is the point? Like, give me the value.
Well, the podcast in 3 minutes, the 3 minute podcast.
The 3 minute podcast. Which is just us doing an awkward intro for 3 minutes and saying, well, that's it, folks.
That's it. I think we're out. Yikes.
So before we go today, I do want to like touch on this, and I think we could do a whole podcast about this, but flow state. I've been saying it so much recently, flow state and getting into flow state. So I guess, what does that mean to you, flow state?
That's the thing that I want, but I don't get all the time. You know, it's like me, it's like I'm in procrastinate state till it's do or die. And then I'm like, But the flow state, I had that the other day when I was like editing real estate photos, and I'm like, okay, I'm just not getting down to it, you know, and I'm just like sitting down, I'm just trying to do it, get distracted because it's kind of boring, you know, and then I'm basically like, okay, let's play some music on Spotify, and I don't need audio, so I'm like, oh, got an 80s playlist, and that got me good, you know, I'm like, yeah, so I'm just like vibing out there to some 80s, and I'm just like editing, and I'm just in a mood, you know, and I'm like, oh, this is great, maybe I should try that again, you know, and for photos, it's a cool thing, but for video, it's kind of rough, so that's the balance, how to get into it, you know, there's cheat codes, I feel like.
Yeah, there is cheat codes, and I think all of us have our own kind of cheat codes for that flow state. You know, I've been struggling with that for the last year, you know, and admittedly, I've started to find that when I leave my home office, I actually can achieve that flow state more. When I have choice, when I have all these things I can go do, I feel like that's the interruptions, right? So doing work at home can be hard because you're like, well, the couch is in the front room, or, you know, for you have your wife in another room you can go talk to, and there's cats to go cuddle, and there's things to go do. You know, and I think that can be problematic. That's where a co-working space or something like that can be really great, because it's a boring room. What else are you going to do here? Everyone's being quiet and working. Or like, what do you?
They will judge you if you're not working. They're like, what is that guy doing here?
A little bit. You do feel that because you see people like really kicking butt, and you're like, you know, maybe I should be kicking some butt. Yeah, but you know, so and I love flow state. Like when I'm painting is a great example of flow state. I've gotten to a place now where I can paint all day without even realizing it. It could literally go 12 hours. Could pass, and I'm like, oh wow, I just painted that whole 12 hours. And so it's like getting that flow state's a very important place, I found. And so for you, it seems like music kind of helps. That's the thing that gets you in that flow state.
Yeah, it's for me, it's like it's more the headphones and the isolation, you know, and being like isolated and only have one thing to look at. And you see this place, you know, let's look at it. There's so much stuff flying around, you know. This is a German way of saying there's a lot of stuff. but I'm like, yeah, basically I'm like, if it's not clean, I cannot get really into flow state. I
love that you said that. Yeah, because I'm finding the same thing. You know, even just having a stack of business cards on the desk or something else, it can really just. So yeah, I'm the same way. I have to kind of clean everything off. Everything kind of has to be kind of
tunnel vision. You gotta get you gotta get the tunnel vision. You gotta get the headphones on. You gotta get like, you know, set the mood where it's like, okay, I don't need to see the phone. You know, the worst thing you can do is like have the phone right next to the computer where it's like, you know, I'm like, oh, let's do bad. Yeah. So don't have the phone there. Have like your headphones on. Noise canceling is amazing because it removes like, let's say, AC, dryer, or whatever.
Right.
And then maybe some blue glasses, you know, like to cut the blue light, but that's not really needed. But I feel like it builds a habit if you have your setup, you know.
Yeah, I think you're right. You know, I'm someone that did blue glasses for a while. I don't really do them anymore, but yeah, you're right. Having that kind of thing, you know, I set up my mouse pad, I put on my glasses, I put the case away, you know, all these kind of things, you know, you set yourself up. You know, a lot of us, that's coffee, I think. You know, I think that's something that, you know, we've always had where we're like, okay, well, once I make the cup of coffee, we're
sitting down.
That's part of the whole flow. And so you're right. It's kind of setting what are the things. And one thing that I would also suggest too to people is setting alarms. And then saying, I'm going to work until that alarm goes off. I think that when I find I don't want to work, when I'm really dragging myself to that computer to do something, that's when I'll set the alarm. I'll be like, okay, 1 hour, but you can't stop working till that alarm goes off.
Yeah, that is the thing where I have to practice with. Like, I'm currently in my state where I'm like, okay, gotta practice that calendar. A man does or dies by his calendar or something like that.
Oh, I like that.
You know, so it's like, basically, I'm like, my calendar should be stuffed and it's not stuffed, and I'm like, I'm just reacting and I should not react. I should be like calling the shots, you know. I watched like a video about Kenkido where he's like, okay, he's scheduling his like 1,000 hours, you know, of mastery, or 10,000 hours. If you put them in the calendar, you actually achieve the mastery in a planned timeline. You know, what is like a really cool tool to do? Like, you want to get your drone license? That's me kind of. I should schedule my time and just no matter what happens, do it. But
yeah. Well, and daily, I think the daily thing is a big thing, right? Like when you brush your teeth, you're not thinking about brushing your teeth, right? When you're making your bed, you're not thinking about making your bed. The things you do every day, you know, are the things that you stop to think about. So it's like for you getting the drone license, a consistent hour at a consistent time every day that you go towards doing that, right? I think that would get you to that flow state, because, you know, after the first week, I would argue that you wouldn't even, that hour would go by so fast. You'd be like, God, I wish I had more time than that. But you know, I think chunking things up like that. So for my painting, you know, so one thing I've done in my creative life, because I found that I wasn't painting fast enough. Like the projects were always more important, right? Clients are always more important than these side gigs. So I've made a rule that every Friday morning I paint. No matter what, really. I mean, if everything's blowing up, maybe I won't, but it has to take that, right? And so what's really interesting about it is I've created almost this thing of excitement about it now. Yeah. And I will say that too, is if you're excited to do something, that flow state is so much easier to reach. When you're like excited to do it, you're like, I cannot wait to jump into this. Yeah. You can instantly get to that flow state. It's actually kind of incredible how fast you go to the flow state when you want to do it. And I think like limiting it can do that too, right? So if I want to paint and I really love it, you would think, okay, well, I'll paint for 10 hours. Well, maybe that dampens it, where like if I stop at an hour and I'm like, but I still want to do it, but it's like, nope, time's over. Well, now you want to do it tomorrow even more.
Like the whole thing with the thinking in general is like, the more you think, the more problems you have. You know, it's like you overthink, then it's like, oh, should I really do that for 10 hours? You know, instead of just enjoying the moment, I'm like, just draw. You know, and just like doing the thing and being like in the moment. And I feel like we are like so packed with action and things to do that we kind of lost the ability to just let go and be in the moment. And I feel like that maybe is like the flow state where it's like, okay, just let go and I'm like, do my thing and I have fun with it, you know, and do it as long as I feel like. But it's like, no, now you have the phone going on, you have this going on. I got to be there. We got to cook. What do we eat later on? You know, we have those artificial rules that kind of destroy the flow state, where it's like, you know, a 5-year-old is like, I'm on the computer, I'm playing games, you know, he's not thinking about like, oh, I need to prepare food. I'm need to go to work and got to prepare this. You know, the less you think, the better you are in a way. If that makes sense.
No, I agree. I think it's about like kind of lubing the path all the way to a good remarkable thing.
Experience.
Right? Yeah. So you know, so you don't. Yeah, so it's you know, like I think a lot of people have heard the stories of Steve Jobs, right? Like he always wore a black turtleneck and like blue jeans because he didn't want to think too much. He didn't want to ever think about the stuff he's wearing. It was just another thing. So a lot of creatives will do that, of like eliminate the data. You know, eliminate choice sometimes, because, you know, we all want choice. We all want customization. Maybe when you eliminate that, it actually frees your brain up for other creativity.
I like that. I mean, that's very powerful. So, but on this note, I feel like we kind of have to say, hey, comment down below how you get into the flow state, because flowing ain't easy.
Yeah. And with that being said, you know, we're having a lot more guests. So if you want a guest on this podcast, you know, someone who's going to be a great guest for this podcast, please hit us up. You know, we're still doing this. We're going to keep doing this, man.
Yeah. Also, if you're a sponsor and you want to have your ad displayed, reach out. I'm just saying, because we got banners, we got everything going, but it's up to you guys.
Well, anyway, thank you everybody for tuning in for another episode, and we'll catch you next time.
Yeah, have a good one. Bye.